Miles Pierce mortgaged his parents' house, cashed out everything he had, took out loans he wasn't even sure he could repay, and bet every single penny on a project nobody understood. A school. Not your average school. A training center for forgotten youth. People the system had tossed aside. Former inmates, the unemployed, expelled students. People like he once was. It all started with empty walls and neck-deep debt. He slept on the floor, ate once a day. He was humiliated, but he kept going. Today, that building hosts over 300 people a year. It teaches trades, builds leaders, gives a voice to those who never had one. It's a reference point now, and nobody talks about that place without mentioning his name. This is the story of a man who bet it all, who got this close to losing everything, but chose to keep going and turned risk into legacy. Miles Pierce didn't get lucky. He just refused to die average. It wasn't an accident. Miles didn't just wake up one day feeling motivated, inspired, or ready. He woke up tired, another day on the same old path. Alarm going off before sunrise, suit hanging by the door, same coffee, same subway station, same people staring into nothing. He had what most people would call a good life. Steady paycheck, air-conditioned office, health insurance, but something inside him was dying, little by little, day after day. The exact moment? A random Tuesday, nothing special. He was in a meeting, one of those where nobody says anything real. And then his boss dropped this line. If we keep up the pace in 3 years, we could double our profits. Everyone smiled, took notes, clapped, except Miles. He just stared out the window thinking, in 3 years, am I still going to be here? That thought hit him like a punch to the gut. And then came the next question, even worse. Well, what if I'm wasting my life? That day, he didn't finish work. He stood up, walked out, never went back. No big announcement, no LinkedIn post. He just breathed for the first time in forever. Over the next few weeks, he sold his car, canceled subscriptions, cut all the extras, and used every last dime he had to buy the oldest, cheapest, most forgotten building in a city no one remembered. He had no blueprint, no team, just one vision. I'm going to build something that actually means something. In that moment, he didn't jump because he was brave. He jumped because staying meant dying slowly. Miles thought the hardest part would be making the decision, but it wasn't. The real challenge came after, when he started telling people what he'd done. His friends laughed. His mom cried. His dad stayed silent. You gave up a stable job for this? Why you of all people? You really think you're going to change the world? Are you sure about this? No one asked how he was doing. They just asked when he was going to quit. And that stings. Because when the whole world starts doubting you, a part of you starts doubting yourself too. The nights got longer. The building he bought felt even more abandoned when silence took over. Some days he thought about giving it all back, selling the place, apologizing, going back to his old job. But then he remembered that one question. What if I'm wasting everything? And that was enough to keep him going. He started working alone, sweeping the floors, clearing out junk, laying bricks, even though he'd never done it before. Every wall fixed was a tiny win, but nobody clapped. He went weeks without hearing a single good job. Everyone he knew vanished. But deep down, Miles knew if he needed applause to keep going, he never would have started. The world said no, but he had already answered. And I'm not here to ask for permission. The first unpaid bill was the warning sign. Then came the power shutoff. Then the water. Miles started living in the dark, literally. The building he bought became a shelter, not for dreams, but for scraps. He slept on an old mattress on a concrete floor, used his phone flashlight to get around, and in his pocket, he had nothing but a few coins. Food came from whatever was left at the farmer's market. Same loaf of bread for 3 days. And every morning, waking up in the cold with an empty stomach, he'd ask, how much longer can I do this? The work had stopped. He had no crew. He tried hiring help, but no one wanted to work on a project with no name, no structure, no future in sight. So he started doing it all himself. One man, one sledgehammer, and one idea. For weeks, the only sound he heard was his own footsteps echoing through that broken down building. And that's when loneliness became his only companion. No one called. No one showed up. It was like he'd vanished from the world. And then one Saturday night, tired, covered in paint, hands cut and bleeding, Miles broke down. Sitting on the floor, leaning against a brick wall, he cried harder than he had in years. Cried from the pain, the doubt, the fear. That one question haunted him daily. What if I'm wrong? His mind kept turning on him. Thinking about his friends out at dinner, laughing, moving on. His family living life without even mentioning his name. His bank account empty. He thought about quitting, not out of weakness, but because the weight of his choice felt impossible to carry. And right there in that freezing night, lying on cold concrete, one thought cut through like lightning. If I go back now, I won't be able to live with myself. It wasn't pride. It wasn't stubbornness. It was the pain of knowing he'd come farther than he ever imagined. And turning back would mean bearing all of it. So he got up, slowly, sore but standing. He looked at the building, still broken, still empty. But for the first time, he didn't see ruins. He saw a home. And right there, filthy, starving, and alone, Miles Pierce made a promise. I won't stop until this place becomes something that inspires someone. No matter how long it takes, no matter how many cold nights lie ahead, he chose to keep going because down at rock bottom, he saw something he'd never seen before. Strength. The lights came back on, but not the electricity. It was the light he started seeing in the eyes of someone who believed. A 17-year-old kid named Lucas. He showed up at the building for the first time with a backpack and no hope in his eyes. Kicked out of school, no dad, no direction. Miles listened to his story in silence. When the kid finished talking, Miles said just one thing. If you want, you can start tomorrow. There was nothing ready. No schedule, no equipped classroom, no official curriculum. But the floor was clean. There was space, and there was someone willing to teach, and someone willing to learn. That was the first real brick laid. Not in the wall, in the purpose. In the days that followed, Miles started waking up earlier. Not because he had to, but because someone was counting on him now. He set up a simple room with reclaimed wooden tables, hooked up an old router, brought in books he'd read himself. The place was still rough, but to Lucas, it was the best place he'd ever been. And soon another kid showed up, then another, and another. The word spread fast, but not online. It was all word of mouth. Invisible people telling other invisible people that there was a place where someone treated them like human beings. Miles didn't charge a thing. He just had one rule. Commitment, show up on time. Do the work, respect the space, and little by little things started coming together. A retired electrician offered to help set up the wiring. A retired carpenter started stopping by twice a week. A small local NGO donated paint and chairs. What used to be silence became the sound of conversation, learning, and life. Miles was still broke, but for the first time, he felt whole inside. And slowly he began to realize what he'd built wasn't just a training center. It was a space for transformation. A place where people didn't come to get a diploma. They came to find hope. Lucas was the first to complete the full cycle. Took a vocational course, learned carpentry, got a job, bought his first tool with his paycheck. One day he came back to Miles with a gift wrapped in newspaper, a brand new hammer. So you can keep building even when you've got nothing left in the tank. That wasn't just a gift. It was confirmation, proof that the seed he'd planted was growing. He still had no money, still no stability, still woke up exhausted. But now he knew he wasn't alone anymore. And there, for the first time since the beginning, Miles Pierce looked at the building and finally saw what he had built. A new path for him, for those who would come after, and for everyone who never had a chance to start. It didn't happen overnight. There were no fireworks, no magazine covers, but the deepest changes don't make noise. They grow slow in the dark. And one day when you finally notice they've taken over everything, in just 2 years, the center Miles Pierce had built became a point of reference. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't high tech, but it was alive. The place breathed purpose. All kinds of people started showing up. Former inmates looking for a fresh start. Single moms searching for a second chance. Kids dropped by the school system. And every one of them found something simple and rare. Someone who believed in them. Miles was still running the place, but he never put himself above anyone. He taught what he knew, learned what he didn't. He was a mentor, janitor, coordinator, and listener. One by one, the cycles kept forming and finishing. People walked in broken and walked out with their heads held high. It was Lucas who convinced him to finally give the project an official name. We need a sign. People need to know where they've arrived. Miles smiled. He'd never thought about that. The following week, a simple wooden sign was bolted above the entrance. The workshop. And that's when the turnaround truly began. The local trade school invited Miles for a partnership. 2 former students started their own businesses and came back to teach. A small story ran in the local paper with the headline, "The place where nobody gets left behind." Then the city council got involved. They offered a bit of help. Nothing game-changing, but for the first time, the outside world acknowledged that the place existed. And then came the moment that changed everything. A young woman named Aline graduated from the center. A few months later, she passed a government exam. First in her family to land a public job. At the swearing-in ceremony, they gave her 1 minute to thank someone. She took the mic, looked at the camera, and said, "I'm only here because of one place and one man, Miles Pierce." That video went viral, not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. Hundreds of people saw it, and they showed up. Volunteers, teachers, entrepreneurs. No one could understand how something like that had popped up in the middle of nowhere. And Miles always gave the same answer. "I just wanted to do something that made sense." He still lived modestly, still rode the bus, still stayed up late and got up early, But now every step he took was followed by people who once thought about giving up, and who now carry tools, dreams, and a new perspective on life. He didn't build a business. He built possibility. And that, my friend, is priceless. The building's still the same. The walls aren't perfect. The floor still creaks in some places. But now there are photos on the walls, names written down, graduation pictures, stories that started broken and got pieced back together inside those rooms. Miles walks those hallways like he's walking through himself. Every corner brings back memories. Paint on his hands, back pain, fear, and silence. That silence that used to mean emptiness. Now it's full of meaning. Every now and then someone asks, "How did you make all this happen?" He gives a half smile, looks to the side, scratches his beard, and says, "I just kept going when everyone else stopped." He doesn't like calling himself the founder. Never cared much for the word leader. To him, all he did was keep a promise made to himself. On that cold night, with his body wrecked and his future looking dark. Today, he makes less than he used to. No fancy car, no beach house. But he's got something most people don't. Peace. He knows that if he left tomorrow, what he built would keep going. Because it's not about him. It's about the ones who came through that place and walked out different. The boy who once arrived not knowing how to read, now teaches as a volunteer. The girl who used to panic at the thought of public speaking, now runs a debate group with over 40 kids. And Miles, these days, Miles plants trees in the workshop's backyard. One tree for each class. Each seed represents a story, a fresh start. He's not chasing recognition anymore. He doesn't need to, because he knows he won, not against the world, not against the critics. He beat the part of himself that wanted to quit. And that's the hardest victory anyone can achieve. Miles Pierce's reward wasn't what he earned. It was who he became and how he changed everything around him. In the end, life doesn't pay you in money. It pays you in purpose, in good nights of sleep, in the certainty that you didn't walk this earth for nothing. And if everything you've built makes sense to even just one person, it was all worth it. Miles Pierce didn't want to be remembered as a successful man. He wanted to be remembered as someone who had the guts to start. And that's exactly what he did. He started, even scared, even clueless, even alone. He started. And in the end, that was everything.